Hey everyone. So I apologize for being late. We had technical difficulties, which always works, but this is going to be a good one. I think we're going to cover a good little topic tonight. I've got a This Naked Mind coach that I'm going to bring in a second. So today we are not. Peggy is not here. Peggy is in the. Hold on, just a second. She is in Palm Springs right now doing the Sober in the City event. So she is not going to be with us. And I'm bummed. I'm emotionally lost without Peggy. And I wanted to do a different opening music just for her because of, something that just touched the moment of how I'm feeling not having Peggy here. And I thought about a little song that just would come from the heart of how I feel about not having to listen to her tonight say horrible things. And the only song that I think tonight's theme song is going to be in honor of my good friend. She's gone. She is the best, but Peggy is not here. She's down in Palm Springs, where I think they're getting snow right now. I have no idea, but they're getting blizzard-like conditions or a ton of rain. California's getting no more talk of the drought out west. But anyways, I am thrilled to have. I'm going to bring in our guest tonight, Mary Walls. How are you doing, Mary?
Great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Peggy, hey, how are you doing out there if you're anywhere around? Listen, I'm not so excited about you being gone as Jeff. That's all I got.
She's gone. And this is wonderful. This could be like one of the best shows I've ever had, and we haven't even started yet.
So happy.
She's wonderful. No, she's doing the Sober in the City event, I think. So she's having a blast, hopefully, and she'll be back next week. But so Mary is a coach with This Naked Mind. And we were in a group coaches discussion a week or so ago. And Mary brought up a point about, and this sounds wrong, but that being stuck in sobriety. And it struck me because how can we be stuck in something that is so good? And I thought maybe you said something wrong. It didn't make any sense, but you explained what your definition of being stuck in sobriety is, and it made sense. And I realized how many of us, including myself, I just had 3 years, but I was stuck in sobriety as well. So I want to hear some of your story, but I want to know what did you mean, and you can fill us in however you want, but what did you mean by being stuck in sobriety? Because that sounds like a bad thing, and sobriety is supposed to be a good thing.
Yeah, living an alcohol-free lifestyle is an enormous opportunity, I think, for any human being, and absolutely worthwhile. That journey is absolutely a worthwhile journey to undertake, and I think it has multiple levels for people. People have different experiences with that and with getting there. You and I had a kind of an epiphany moment on a kind of a coaching call, where you were talking about people who sort of come to a moment, and all of their intentions are aligned. All of the work has been done. They have made all the effort. They've coached with you, and they end up back in a place that they, have told themselves a million times they're not going to go.
Far too commonly, by the way.
Yeah, too commonly. Well, and I love it. Our mentor and our founder, Annie Grace, I think she speaks, Annie Grace, the mentor and founder of the This Naked Mind methodology. She speaks very poignantly to this when she talks about, knowing herself to be a very, very powerful, committed, intentional, successful individual. And when it came to making this critical decision for herself, something she really wanted in her life, she couldn't understand how she was able to put all of these other aspects of success together. And this was a moment that continued to be elusive to her. And
you hear people say, and I always said this, why do I keep doing this to myself?
yeah,
When I know this is so bad, this is ruining this is cheating me out of this is costing me this, and yet here I go again. Are you talking the same thing?
Yeah, I'm talking the same thing. And honestly, you named it something that afternoon that's skipping me right now, but in
Jeff's theory.
Yeah, Jeff.
No, it wasn't critical moment.
Yeah, when you talked about the critical moment, and I I have a sense about that moment. I have had a very intimate relationship with that moment through a broad span of my lifetime, which sometimes when I look back, it's pretty profound to me. I don't know really the intention of this journey in my life. I don't know that I ever will, and it's not something I try to go too deeply into, but I'm very familiar with that breakout moment. And it hit me during that conversation that this isn't just a trigger, that this isn't just being caught off guard. This is something that you literally can feel rising up in you and you know is coming. It's something you're familiar with. It's something you bump into repeatedly. And it's a moment, I believe, that many people give into with the conception, with the story we tell ourselves that it's going to be okay. We'll just start it over again tomorrow. It might work out this time, or it's going to work out this time. And that never really is the experience.
When does this happen? Is this 30 days into our journey? Is this 6 months typically? Is it vary from person? Do you remember when you felt it?
Well, I would say it's just a part of an individual's journey, that finds themselves struggling to really gain this, that finds themselves struggling to really find freedom in the alcohol-free lifestyle journey.
What you said,
the epiphany moment, that's the moment I believe that has the opportunity to catapult you. I believe that, and we kind of likened it to Star Wars, like it almost could be like that. What did you call it? That moment where you go through the black hole and you're like zipped across into another stratosphere, where I believe that's the moment that really has the opportunity to have major impactful change for people that recognize that this is a repetitive experience.
What I saw when you said this, and I talk about the difference between sobriety and recovery.
Sure.
And I hate labels and I hate words, but
sure,
something's got to work. So I'm just sticking with those. Sure. But sobriety is how I get through day one. Sobriety is learning how to make the choices not to drink. Sobriety is recognizing that this is a bad choice. And in sobriety, I still carried alcohol with me, whether I was drinking it or not. And I'm not talking physically. I'm talking in my mind. Alcohol was still, I was not drinking, but it was still a part of my life. I was at a concert and I was in sobriety because I was choosing and making a decision not to drink. It was still sobriety. I still carried alcohol with me during sobriety. Recovery was the point when I left it and I no longer had to make decisions. I didn't have to make choices. I didn't have to decide if I was going to. I didn't have to plan how I was going to. Recovery was beyond sobriety. Whatever it is took over for me. I didn't have to do the work anymore. I still had to do the you still prepare. You keep things, you know, who you're going to see, you know, the situation. You
Yeah.
take care of some business,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. I was able to forget about it. It was living. It was being able to live forgetting about alcohol, and that was what that was. That's when this road became incredibly, you know, the perfectly enjoyable. And it almost became easier because I no longer was still carrying this thing that I had to bring it with me, but not make sure I never touched it.
Yeah, Annie Grace would call that alive. You know, you've reached that stage of really being alive, where you are completely capable, and it's the unconscious. Like, you have reached that point where you're living your life fully, and you know that whole idea behind the fixation around alcohol is gone. And now, I mean, let's really think about what we're talking about there. Like, the work that has to go in for the fixation around the thought of alcohol, or the desire for alcohol to be gone, to reach that place where you are describing liberation. So I believe that, so my story, you know, my story is, you know, alcohol has been in my life. It probably is the most consistent variable throughout the entirety of my life. And, you know, so many things have changed. Honestly, I feel like I've lived so many different lives and different personas. But alcohol has been absolutely been the common denominator through all of that. And so in my struggled a great deal in my throughout my 20s, knew that this was something that was a problem, but wasn't recognizing it as the reason that I couldn't seem to be the successful individual that I knew I had the capability of being. When the moment came that that realization finally hit home, you know, this is like 30 years ago, traditional recovery programs were all that was available. And I jumped in with both feet. It took me quite a while in the traditional model. But over time, I was able to put together a lifetime of sobriety, recovery, alcohol-free living, raised a family, did all of that work, and did all of the work. But there was something that in that was always lacking for me and missing. So I had that.
What did that feel like? Did it just feel like an emptiness? Did it feel a lack of fire or lack of motivation? Or was it the I should be on top of the world right now because I've gotten rid of this demon and I don't feel it?
Yeah, well, please don't get me wrong. I was incredibly grateful. I have two beautiful daughters. They're both grown women now. They're absolutely incredible human beings, and I was graced by God to raise them completely alcohol free. What that felt like for me, I don't think I can explain the gratitude that I had for not drinking, because it has always been a very painful experience for me. But I hadn't reached what, you know, what AA would call being like catapulted into the fourth dimension. I was very faithful, working the steps, sponsorship, all of it, but I never reached that plateau. So I was almost like living in a dry drunk. So like I had anger and resentment, and I was just carrying this, like this soul wrenching experiences that would crop up that were easily triggered by situations in my life. So I had taken care of the behavior 100%. The behavior was gone. And I come from a family and people who were very much involved with alcohol. So I had to decide early on in my recovery that I was going to be around people that drank. I was going to be around alcohol. They were my people. It was just my people. So that was always my experience. There were several times over the course of those years that became a little bit challenging for me. I had to have a very conscious effort that wasn't going to be my experience, and I was successful in that. There was always something, it was always just something gnawing at me. I think if you were to ask my husband, he would be able to speak to that. There was always something that just, I don't know, there was just something inside that had me so just angry, and it was easily triggered by various types of situations. And then after my daughters left home, one of those situations occurred, and I decided after about 27 years that I was gonna try drinking again to numb that experience. So
what was that? What was that after that much time?
well,
How was your evening and how was your following morning?
I gotta say that I was a long time AAer. I had an experience that was very typical to what people talk about. I was in a situation where I was not spiritually fit, and I was very triggered by a situation. And honestly, there was a bottle of Irish whiskey on the counter, and the next thing I knew, I poured a glass. I was sitting out, in a beautiful lake house. I was in front of a fire. I was by myself, and that's where it began. The next morning was, horrible, because you don't just go from spending, struggling for 10 years to get sober, spend, almost 27 years sober, and then the next thing you know that you've picked up a drink. Coming from traditional methods of recovery, that's a very difficult moment to find yourself in, and there's an indoctrination around that through traditional recovery that makes that a very, very painful and frightening experience.
Do you know why you drank that night, or did you, and do you now?
Well, I know now why I did. If you had asked me then why I did, I would have said because I hadn't been as devout to practicing my program as I should have been. I wasn't as connected as I should have been. I wasn't as close as I should have been. And that my stinking thinking took over, right? Is what I would have said then. And I did exactly what any good individual in my shoes would have done. I continued to try to make that work for myself for a while, thinking that it had been so long. That was not my experience. Probably my greatest regret is, that my daughters, for the first time in their lives, were experiencing this side of who I can be. And I went back into the traditional recovery. And very much for me, like the first time, I was not able to put that time together. I just wasn't able to put any time together. And anybody coming through traditional recovery knows what that means. I just couldn't get any significant time. And so I was continually, going back into the rooms and, admitting that I had relapsed repeatedly. It was very,
once you had that night.
Once I had that night.
Session.
Yeah, it took me about 6 months to make it back in. Within about 3 months of that, I was back fully indoctrinated, doing all the stuff,
But at this point, you still had no answers as to why.
No.
Because, one thing I want to be clear is that I came out of AA is what got me sober. And obviously I have gone through the Naked Mind. The best program that I'm going to support on this show is the one that works for you. And I'm not talking you, Mary. I'm talking for anyone that, so I'm not, AA worked for me. So did a lot of other things. My recovery or my journey is a a smorgasbord. I looked at everything and I put on my plate the stuff that I wanted to eat, and my plate's going to look different than any other people. So yeah. I'm not picking any recovery program. The best one out there is the one that works for you. But that being said, you mentioned that something with Annie Grace's program that flicked the switch or that shined light on what it was. How did you find that?
Well, first I'd like to say, please don't get me wrong, because, I was sober for almost 30 years, and that happened through Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all that there was. There was no internet. I owe my life to that, 100%. But what I do know is that I never reached this place of full freedom that I believed was capable, and that I was desperately hoping to find. That just that inner peace. There was always this gnawing thing. There was always this, worried that it was behind me, always having to be careful, not getting too far away from the support system, all of those things. And so,
what did you hear from Annie Grace that turned this light on?
Well, the second time around, I was struggling in the same way. I was still, I was back in doing all the things, all the recommendations. I followed them, still in that relapse cycle. And honestly, what happened for me was that this time around in my journey, there was the internet. And so it's so painful to be in that relapse cycle. And I suppose what I would like to say is that I'm also saying whatever works for anyone. Absolutely stay on that ship, follow that guidepost, because the most important thing is to move away from this painful journey. This is a hopeless condition of mind and body. There's no doubt about it. And whatever you find that can work for you, that's moving you forward, I am 100% with that. My experience is I couldn't get it again. And because there was the internet, I found a group one day because I was desperately searching, and I bumped into a group. It was called the Alcohol Experiment Community. Somebody in there had posted, they were on day one again, and they were desperate, and they were scared, and they were disappointed in themselves, and they were ashamed, and they were speaking about guilt. And I could identify with all of that. But then in the comments, I saw people lifting them up. I saw people talking about, don't give up, and let's get curious about why this happened, and hold compassion for yourself, and maybe we can figure out what it was that triggered that, and go back and journal, and remember to hold yourself loosely. And these were not the emotions that I was experiencing. Now, I'm not saying that the group was putting those experiences on me. This was my journey. But what I heard from that intrigued me enough that I went after This Naked Mind and the Alcohol Experiment feverishly. And it was a game changer for me. What I found, I found the science and the methodology behind the fact that we all have the ability to be addicted to alcohol, that I'm not a unique individual in a unique group. I'm not genetically, I don't have genetic predisposition to make this happen for me. I wasn't powerless. My body was absolutely working perfectly. And for me, for my journey, those things changed my whole experience and the way I was able to approach my relationship with alcohol. And this is what changed for me. I'm a faithful, and to this day, I'll say, that the 12 steps of AA are a powerful, powerful experience to get involved with and to go in and work. And when we move into a place of inventory where we really start to take a look at ourselves and to understand the damage we've done, with our behaviors and we're able to go and make amends to people, there's a very cathartic spiritual experience that can begin to happen for us, and part of what those steps do is they bring people back to the fact, and I've said this all along, for many of us, not all of us, for many of us, I believe that severe alcohol use is a spiritual malady, right? And the many people, that go through the experience or even go through traditional methods of recovery. Some people get it very quickly. Some people get it in a short period of time. And some people, like I did, they can struggle for a long period of time. What I've learned from this naked mind.
Go back to with Annie, because I understand the compassion and pick you up and not to beat yourself up, but understanding that, did that take away the things that were making you stuck?
No. But they did allow me to take I was saying this to you the other day. I had a great big stick in the corner of my room that I was using regularly and often throughout the day. It allowed me to take that stick and put it away for a time and open my mind and open this book. And this is what I was going to say that I learned. Some people are stuck in alcohol over their beliefs about the substance. And then they start to really dig in and try to get some knowledge around, is what they believe about the substance true? Like, actually, alcohol has the same chemical component, identical chemical equation as gasoline, the ethanol. The chemical equation is identical. So some people learn those things and they're like, gross, and they walk away. It's a no-brainer.
I couldn't have cared less.
Right. Me neither. Some people have these beliefs around, like these societal beliefs. It's going to be, the party's going to be so much more fun, or, it's going to make my work gatherings better. And, like Annie often talks about, this lead me to more promotions. Well, the reality is, those things aren't true. You actually get a little more lethargic. You probably talk a little too much. You may get a little sloppy. I mean, is it really making it so great? Or is that just a myth? Is that a belief we've been taught? So some people learn that and they're like, oh, gross. I'm done with this. This is not working out as well as I thought. Or some people learn how to moderate with it. Okay.
I found yes to everything, but none of them were enough. For me, it was sure that applies, but knowing that isn't gonna change it. All I knew is that I didn't like how I felt when I wasn't drinking, right. And when I drank, I don't know if I did like how I felt, at least at first, but more importantly, I didn't feel like I felt when I didn't drink. So it wasn't that it added this great thing; it took away the crap that I felt before. So it was like, this is rat poison. I don't care. I don't feel like I did before I drank it.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't care right now.
Yeah. But tomorrow's.
I always care the next day.
Yeah. It was like, another drink's going to kill you. This is going to kill you. It's like Keith Richards is still kicking and he's in his if he's alive,
I'm good.
Why is this? If this is that bad?
Right.
Look at the Rolling Stones. Right. The guy that died is the one that didn't drink. Okay, so don't use that argument. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are and Ron Wood are doing great. Yeah. Charlie Watts, the drummer that didn't drink, is the one that passed away. So I didn't buy that argument.
Well, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and throw it out there that maybe some of that is myth too. Like I think this buys into some of the myths that we have learned to capture and create in our own minds and our own stories around alcohol. That these guys think it's so great and they never wanted to stop.
Help me justify it.
We don't know that
to justify it.
We don't know how many times they've laid in their bed at 3 a.m. been like, "What the hell? How did this happen again?" Right, Keith Richards. So, and not, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm not saying I wish I didn't know at least once, but I don't know it now.
But I spent more time looking for the justifications.
Yes.
that I could drink than looking in the mirror and trying to figure out why I was drinking.
And so this brings me to the pivotal point, because you and I also talked about the fact that when I found this Naked Mind, jumped in with both feet and really have given it a lot of effort. I was really torn because my history is one where, my life was saved. There's no doubt. I was going under in my 20s, and traditional recovery was a game changer in my life. 100%. I was very, very torn because the methodologies, this is like, I no longer label myself alcoholic. I don't do that. I no longer consider myself powerless. I feel like I am very powerful when it comes to this substance. What I do know today is what happened for me through traditional recovery as I did all the work and it took care of the behavior. And I got in the boat on one side of the lake and I rowed it to the middle of the lake where I was told I better stay in the middle there and circle around with everybody else and don't get out, because if I get too far away, it's going to go south. Now, I believed it. I believed that. And I never got to the other side of the lake. I never got out of the boat. So I never found this peace that I was looking for. Then I drank again. I found this Naked Mind. And then what I learned was that there's also another level. There's levels at the belief of, there's beliefs at the level of self. There's subconscious beliefs so far deep inside of us that create the situation where you say, I don't care if I'm drinking poison. I don't care if that's happening. I just want it to be numb. Even if it's just the beginning that I enjoy, I don't care. I need to enjoy that beginning. Well, there's a very deep reason for that. I saw a thing on Sigmund Freud. It's exactly what he talked about. The subconscious desires that we have inside, we may never take the time to discover, they are the desires that are creating the course of your life today. Now, this is what this Naked Mind talks about. For some of us, it's the belief about the substance. We learn that and we can walk away. It's the belief about the society or the substance and society. We learn them, we can walk away. For some of us, we find alcohol that we're using at a very subconscious level of self. And then I heard, I believe, I don't know who I heard talk about this. It might have been you and I were talking about a book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Some people carry so much anxiety because of some of the trauma they've experienced early on in their life that they're always waiting. They're always like anxious. They're always, the next shoe is going to drop. So they're always right there on the line, hyper vigilant, watching everything. And the first time they take a drink, it is gone. And that was literally my experience. Mm-hmm. Literally my experience. It completely went away. And then it became the thing. I was like, what? That's gone? I learned a lot through traditional methods and did a lot of self-discovery about the behaviors that I had created that needed to stop, that were really derailing my life. What I failed to find out through that was that maybe I needed to go a little bit deeper and find out what it was inside of me that was driving the need to numb my life. And that's what I found from this Naked Mind. Annie Grace takes this.
How did you find that? How did you find it?
Well, so this Naked Mind takes a methodology. Annie calls it the 3 pillars of change. Traditional methods of recovery take an action, a behavior. You have to stop the behavior. It's an action. Have to stop it, whatever it takes. 10 meetings, 15 meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, coffee with a sponsor 6 times a week, all valid, all good stuff, but it's about the behavior. So once the behavior is in line, then we might start to feel a little better because we're not poisoning ourselves constantly. And then over time, as we're working through these brilliant steps, which are some of the greatest spiritual opportunities, I think, available. And many of the books that I've read talk about that. But then we have a change in our thinking. And that's all wonderful. But it still doesn't bring us to the place where we go in and explore why. Why was it so necessary? Why does it continue to be so necessary to numb that part of myself? And what part of myself is it? We need to go in and find that. The 3 pillars of change, according to This Naked Mind, and this is where Annie talks about the pause, which really, some people really embrace it. Some people, struggle with this concept, and it's a broad spectrum between people that might actually be drinking or their families or people that surround them. But Annie's methodology is you need to understand what your beliefs are first. Let's look at what they are. Let's kind of go in and kind of detect what are our beliefs. What are our beliefs around the substance? Like, I like the way this tastes. Really? Is that true? This helps me sleep. Absolutely a myth. This negates my anxiety. It helps me relax. Absolutely a biological, neurological myth. It does.
See, that was my thing, was the anxiety, because the anxiety with what I had was exhausting. And at the end of the day, I was so tired of fighting anxiety that I just wanted to turn it off.
Right.
And when I shined the window or the light on a certain window, alcohol was a great solution for it. But what I was challenged to look at was, does the alcohol completely leave your life when you go to bed at night? No, it's still in my body till the morning. Okay, well, how is it affecting you in the morning? How is it affecting you? Because, and I realized that I was just a beer drinker, but the beer I drank last night wasn't completely gone from my life when I fell asleep. It was still in my system in the morning, causing me all sorts of hell that caused me to drink the next night. So when I opened the window, when I looked at what does alcohol give me, or how does it affect my life, I looked at the first hour I looked at an hour window from when I started to an hour later in my life. And I can't fight that. I can't argue against it. That's a great hour. But the truth is, open that window, the next morning, I'm sweating like a pig, sleeping.
Yeah.
Not exercising, sleeping. I am filled with anxiety and shakes and down. I mean, just a wreck in the morning. And if I look at the real window and say, well, how does alcohol affect your anxiety? If I look at it that way, and it took me a while to believe this, and I had to put it up against in a court of law. I had to try to defend it and prosecute it. And the truth is, it messed up my next day.
100%.
And I had to prove, when I took the alcohol away, suddenly my next days were pretty good.
Yeah.
And I realized, wow, I was giving alcohol just the credit for, I was giving it credit for that hour. And it's like, if you're going to give it the good credit, you better also, let's be fair and give it all credit. And there was a whole bunch of negative credit that I now realize that, were the effects of it, that were it still was with me the next day. And that was not a relaxing time at all.
No. And, and when I really immersed myself into this methodology and learned that, what I was ingesting, the alcohol I was ingesting, was actually creating higher levels of anxiety within me than it was helping. Mm-hmm. And it was happening very, very quickly, because our body wants to return to homeostasis right away. So as soon as you start to ingest it, we go into that kind of euphoric period. But within a very short amount of time, our biology and neurology is saying, warning, 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 we're out of homeostasis. And it starts to dump a depressant. Our brain dumps a depressant to stabilize that elevation. So we're drinking, we elevate, shoot up really quickly. The body gets wind of it. And it's like, all the alarms and whistles are going off, and it starts dumping all the ammo it's got to bring us back down. We start to come down. We had more to go up. The body dumps more. The side effect of that at 3 a.m. is the alcohol wears off, but the enzyme, the dynorphin, takes much longer to dissipate in the body because it's a biological response. So you still carry it. So you wake up, we all wake up at 3 a.m., frantic, anxious, depressed. And historically, for 30 years, it was my belief that that's because I was spiritually and physically abnormal, and I had the propensity for that to happen. And what it turns out is my body was working absolutely perfectly.
Yeah, I didn't give alcohol any of the cause for, or the negative, that it was responsible for it.
Yeah. Well,
it was that alcohol caused me to not do the things I needed to do.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was, that the anxiety I felt the next day was, the medicine I poured to fix that anxiety was exactly what was giving me. I was just dumping. I was just setting up tomorrow to be, another day of anxiety.
Yeah, I was floored by that. I was floored by the biological and neurological teaching that Annie Grace brought to her methodology. And that's
also the book Alcohol Explained by William Porter.
Love that book.
Yeah, he goes into chapter 1 and chapter 18 goes into this, and there was a whole bunch of, wow, that makes sense.
Well, I'm going to tell you, my passion is working with women that are sober curious. And Holly Whitaker's book, Quit Like a Woman, I mean, that is a seriously powerful book. I would recommend that for, any woman that's really just, and I'm talking about sober curious here because, this is such a big part of our culture. Some of us that have taken it really to the wire, like, we're jumping in and we're doing everything to really pull back. Some people are just asking the question, like, is this so great? Like if I decide today it's not going to happen, and at 5 o'clock I'm at the liquor store with a bottle of wine in my hand, why? Like, why? Just this curiosity. So, I'm just starting this conversation is such a gift. And I just want to finish by this 3 pillars of change, because this is powerful. And this is what has the potential to bring me to peace. And I'm absolutely convinced of it. Annie's methodology is, first, whether you stop drinking or not, you have to begin to explore your beliefs around substance, society, and self, and alcohol. You got to dig deep. You got to ask yourselves the questions. She's got a great method to do it. Anybody buy her books, buy William Porter's book. Alan Carr was one of the original, buy his book. But really start to look at those beliefs, because once we start to change our knowledge around something, once we begin to change our beliefs, like maybe this isn't really true, maybe alcohol doesn't relieve my anxiety, maybe it's creating it. Maybe that's what's true. And there's a lot of science that says it is. Science.
But there is also,
let me finish this. Then we change the way we feel about that. Then we're like, oh, maybe that's not so great. So our emotion begins to change. Now I'm changing the way I feel about it. Like, is that really so great? Like, is that really working like what I have believed my whole life? When we begin to change our emotion, our desires begin to change, and our behavior follows that. So it's not start with the behavior and kill yourself with willpower, which is completely unsustainable for many, many people, and then get an emotional change and a behavior change. It's let's figure out what's going on. Like, what do I really believe about this stuff? And as you learn the truth, because there are many, many, many myths, folks, around alcohol, substance, society, and what we believe it does for ourselves, then our emotion around it changes. Like, wow, maybe this isn't so awesome. Like, I can't get ahead. Maybe this is why. And then once our emotion changes, then our desire starts to change, which is why Annie will say, it's 8 years and this is, I don't even think about it. It's like you want to say, I don't want this bottle following me for the rest of my life. I don't want to be afraid that if I go off track, I'm going to fall into it like I did. And this is why when I, through traditional recovery, did all the behavioral change, got to the middle of the lake, I couldn't get to the other side because nobody was telling me to really go in and explore. Why did I start to numb myself to begin with at 16? What was it that caused me to think that I needed to live my life numb and separate from it? And when that started to happen, I think that's where the game changer is. That's where the power is. And I think that's where the freedom and peace that people are looking for when they move away from this habit. I think that's where it lays.
Well, we're going to talk, we're out of time, but we're going to talk another one about taking advantage of the critical moment, because it's just a little hint about that is, and I found this with myself, is the beliefs you're talking about. I put the facts on paper, even in my head, I could believe it, but it wasn't until I put them into play and lived them that I truly believed them. And I think it was the critical moment is the thing that we avoid because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. We hide from it. And I think that critical moment is the best chance. It's the time I spent months learning on paper how to drive a car, but the biggest gains I got were when I got onto the highway the first time and actually was living it. And I got in the moment experience was when I really, everything came together. And that's what we're going to talk about that with another thing. So you're amazing. I'm going to put the links of how to get a hold of you.
I am just so blessed to have been here today to talk with you about this. Thanks so much for asking me. Really appreciate it.
What's her name will be
Peggy.
Pamela. No, Pauline. It's anyways, she'll be back. Whoever, it's a P, I think. She'll be back next week. And it'll come to me. But Mary, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
We will talk soon, everyone. Angela, hey there. Barbara, good seeing you. Matilda, all the group. It's so good to have everyone here. Thanks again, Mary.
Thank you.
On. I've got party gifts, the play at home version here. So hang on. We'll talk, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
See ya.